Meet ABC 7 anchor Bill Ritter next on a special edition of Carpe Diem. Hello, welcome to Carpe Diem. I'm Marc Rosenweig, retired associate professor in the School of Communication and Media at Montclair State University. Our guest is Bill Ritter, co-anchor of the 6 and 11 p.m. news at ABC 7 in New York. His career spans more than 40 years. He was a correspondent for the ABC News Magazine 2020 and co-host of Good Morning America Sunday. He reported for television stations in Los Angeles and San Diego. He started his career as a newspaper reporter and editor in LA and San Diego. Bill's here today to receive the Allen B. Dumont Broadcaster of the Year Award from our school and to speak with students. And Bill, welcome to campus and congratulations.
Well, thanks, Mark. It's a great honor that you get an award, you know. And when you say 40 years in journalism, I think, wait a minute, no, I still view myself, except when I look in the mirror, as, you know, some 22-year-old kid who's just starting out writing in newspapers. And it's kind of a little sobering to hear you say 40 years in journalism.
Well, let's start at the beginning. You grew up in Southern California.
In LA, yeah.
And you started, at what point did you get interested in journalism? How did you get the bug and how did it happen? You
know, it's very different than I think how the kids at school here and these days are getting it. I was an anti-war activist, and my sort of job as, you know, ragtag kind of anti-war activist organizations was to talk to the reporters and to make sure that we got some press coverage. And really, I got engaged with the reporters a lot about the war. The war, of course, was the premier issue of the time. That was in the late 60s and early 70s. And civil rights and then the Vietnam War really, I think, were the big issues that people felt and talked about. As much as people were talking about the divided country today, the country was as divided then about the Vietnam War. And so I talked to reporters and I thought, God, you know, it's really fascinating what they do. You know, they tried to uncover facts, get the truth, get the story out, communicate. And so I think that by the time I was kicked out of college in my second half of my senior year, I really thought that this is what I want to do. I want to write, I want to be a reporter, and so I went into newspapers. Back then it was an underground newspaper, alternative I think we'd call it now. But that's what started my career. I was a reporter for 15 years in newspaper.
Was it kind of by trial and error at first? Because it wasn't like you were studying or working on the campus paper or anything like that.
Not
right?
at all. No,
yeah.
I was interviewed by the campus paper a lot. Had my picture taken a few times. But no, it was you know, learning as we went. And we were working at a sort of a political newspaper, and we dealt a lot with investigative reporting, and so we learned by doing. Made some mistakes, but also had some incredible experience as a 22 and 23-year-old reporter, uncovering stories that eventually become part of Watergate.
Now you mentioned that you were expelled from San Diego State.
Kicked out.
What happened exactly? Were you sitting in someplace in the president's office?
Not at the president's office, but specifically we were doing a demonstration against an ROTC program at the college. This was at San Diego State University, and I was one of the organizers of the demonstration, and it got out of hand, not by my doing, but I was sort of charged. I was charged criminally, and not sort of, and then brought disciplinary charges were brought against me by the school. So it was heady times, and they said, you're out of here. So after a hearing that I couldn't participate in because I was also facing criminal charges, I don't want to get too much in the weeds of this. It was trespassing and disturbing the peace and all that. It was not any kind of felonious behavior. But it was a rowdy demonstration. I personally, was not a rowdy kind of person, I think, but some of the demonstrators got rowdy, and I was charged and as held responsible for that. So I viewed it all those years as a sort of a war wound, a battle wound of me being against the war. A lot of Americans, more than 50,000 Americans lost their lives. 1 million Vietnamese were either killed or made homeless or injured. So my small contribution to that controversy was to be kicked out of school. And I was sort of, I never shied away from talking about it. And I will say proud that I at least contributed something. I was involved in this big discussion about, I'd say, the most important issue of that time.
Now, speaking of big discussions, we have one going on today with the Trump administration, with some people feeling the First Amendment, the right to publish and free speech is under siege. Any correlation? Certainly as far as protest, but we have social media involved today, right?
It's very different, but the raw correlation would be that you had a president back then, Richard Nixon, who was very much a critic of the press and the coverage of the war, and we saw the ramifications of what happened there. And he had a campaign against reporters, and his enemies list included people in the press. And now with President Trump, now as a reporter covering it for the quote unquote mainstream media, my role is different. But the basic role of trying to find the facts and trying to discover the truth and communicate that is the same. And I know a lot of reporters and people in the press often take it personally when we get attacked. I don't take it personally. I just feel even more inspired and strong about the role of journalism. And I would say that, and this is sort of, I'd say a main theme I'm going to talk about accepting this award, is that
Right.
Our role as journalism, and in fact, the profession itself, reporting, finding facts, searching for the truth, is more important now than ever before, especially with all the echo chambers we have. These devices have caused us to get an abundance of information, some of which is not accurate. I don't like to use the word fake news, because I think what's not accurate is the fact that anyone can just post anything without any kind of editing being involved. You know this as well as anyone, Mark. Journalism, what makes journalism is the exploration and the search for truth and facts, and then having a process by which the information is vetted. Not just saying, someone told me this and I'm going to put it out there. Mm-hmm. And that's not the way news is accumulated or distributed or written and reported. It's not the way it happens. There are avenues and processes in place that are fairly strict about what's true, what's publishable, what's reportable, and what we're able to communicate. And not anyone can just, anyone would say they're a reporter, because that's guaranteed under the Constitution. But social media has changed the paradigm and changed the whole world of how we communicate with each other. And I don't think it's all the time for the good. It's great that we can get stuff out really quickly. It's also not so good that people can say anything they want without vetting whether the information is true or not.
Now, I see you on Facebook and Twitter a lot. You're very active on both forums, and sometimes you have exchanges with viewers as to what's real and what isn't. What is the role that social media plays for you in that vein?
It's a great question. I tend to be very, I share a lot of information about the affairs of the president, the business affairs of the president, and what's happening in Washington. I think that's our role. I don't like to necessarily engage in diatribes. I don't do that. That's not my role. You have a lot of disagreement and division that shows up on social media. You have people trolling who are, whatever you say, I did this the other day. I posted something that happened, and I know we're recording this before it's going to air, so it'll seem outdated, but it doesn't really matter, because there's 15 different things that happen with the Trump administration every day that make whatever you said yesterday sort of outdated.
Right.
But in this particular case, the USDA was reversing something the Obama administration had done about schools and healthy food in schools. No chocolate milk for the kids, and multigrain bread as an alternative to white bread. The USDA under Trump has said, we don't want to do that anymore. It's white bread, it's chocolate milk, all that's good. It reminds me when Ronald Reagan said in school lunches that ketchup was a vegetable.
Right.
Anyway, I posted that. I just posted what the USDA ruling was and what their document they were sending out was. And, you get comments like, well, what about Benghazi? Or you're just a fake news, and, why are you always doing things that are negative? And it wasn't negative or positive, it just what it was. And that was that white bread was coming back to campuses, federally funded school programs, and multigrain bread choices were not going to be available anymore. That's hostile.
Is it more challenging for people like yourself sitting in newsrooms today when people will say, we have all this information and they want to go with it, and you have to say, are we right? Are we correct? Have we checked this out?
I think the social media, the same as cable when it first came on, did to broadcast television. It increases the pressure to get it on, get it on, get it on. The ability to get it on first is, I think, a huge pressure. My feeling is it's better to get it right rather than get it first. And while it's nice to get an exclusive and get the information first, we were first to tell you, that's a big claim that people like to say. I think that's secondary to getting it right. But I think that the station is not in conflict about this. I think that every one of us is pretty much on the same page. We are not going to just go with something because Mark may have said it and you told me this at this taping of the show and I'm going to go report it. We have to vet it ourselves and make sure that we have got it confirmed, or at least attribute it, to someone who has reported it. But it's better to get it confirmed yourself. But the pressure to do that is enormous. Now, you did ask me. I want to finish the thought. Yeah. You did ask me about exchanging and dialogue with the viewers, and yes. my feeling is that I like to do that, and I don't like to do it in a way that alienates people or gets people pissed off at me, or my job is not to lose viewers. We want to get as many viewers as we can.
Well, social media can be a promotional tool to get people to tune in at 11 o'clock also.
I guess that's one way to look at it, and I think that's true, yes, and that's a business way to look at it, right. And there's no question that's part of it. But it's also a fulfilling way to look at it. I want people to, we only have one thing to sell, quote unquote sell, and that's trust. We have information, but people have to trust us. And if they lose trust in us, then as we have seen, people lose trust in some of the broadcasters that are very famous in this country for a variety of reasons. But when you lose that, you lose everything. They can say, well, I don't like his nose, I don't like his hair, I don't like his tie. But what really matters is, do you trust what this person is saying? Do you trust them to at least bring them in as best they can in their manner of speaking and reporting what we believe the truth is and the facts are, and trust that they're not having any kind of other agenda. The dialogue that happens in social media, despite all the vitriol and the threats that reporters get and people saying, you should be fired, blah, 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 it does offer an opportunity to sort of get in the weeds a little bit with people and say, look, let's have a discussion about this. I like to tell people on social media, don't swear, don't call people bad names. If you have an opinion that's different than other people on the posts, on the pages, discuss it. You can do that without personal attacks. And that's sort of the standard I try to have and uphold on my Facebook pages, at least.
Now, one story that has been in the news a lot over the past year has to do with sexual harassment, particularly with media figures. What's your view of coverage of that story and your overall view of that situation?
Well, it's. I mean, I have a lot of views on it, but the main view is we are seeing a sea change of how the workplace is going to be, how relationships in the workplace will be dealt with, and how they're going to be accepted or not accepted. It's great that women, especially, feel empowered to come out and talk about what has been uncomfortable and traumatic for some women in the newsroom, dating back years. Where it ends, I don't know. It's a big, powerful, fast-moving train that has taken down several well-known people already. In the private sector, they have the ability to act very quickly when these things happen. The public sector, it doesn't happen that quickly. You are seeing this with elected officials who have been accused of this. We saw, and this was a discussion I had with my children a lot while it was happening. You had, a man running for president who was accused by almost 24 women, just short of 24 women, of sexual harassment or other things. We heard it on a videotape, an audio tape of him bragging about this, and he got the big prize. He got elected. He didn't get fired, he got elected. But other people who have had great careers suddenly have these dark secrets and dark paths that are very disturbing. And it's more than just innocent, clearly it's more than just sort of innocent, quote unquote, locker room talk. Some of these were very disturbing allegations. And the women who came forward, I think it's bold and brave. And I think that part of it is probably healthy for the country. And more importantly, as we go forward, because that's really the question you're asking, how do we sort of change the dynamics in the workplace so that women don't feel like that, so that men get more of a consciousness about how they come across and what they say and what they do. And I think that's a healthy thing for everyone, for me, for you, for our spouses, for our daughters, for our sons. And I think going forward, I think once all the sort of scandal part of it is aside, I think that's the takeaway here. And I hope it ends up making a healthier, more accepting, and more progressive work environment.
Now, you mentioned your children, and I know they're very proud of you on a number of fronts.
I'm more proud of them.
But especially because after 40 years, you went back to the new school to complete your college degree.
I did.
And you spoke as part of that ceremony, and we're going to show, hopefully in a moment, a picture on the screen of you with your picture from 1972. And tell us about that moment. Well, there you are with the cap and gown. I don't know if they've shown the other
that
picture
was
yet.
Yes, that was the actual commencement day graduation speech. I did not speak at the big one for all the colleges and the university of the new school. I did speak at my particular school, which is a bachelor of for transfer students and adult students who came. The big part of the new school is older students, non-traditional students.
But there's a picture of you. We have it, but hopefully they'll put it in later. Where forgive me, but it's kind of the Wolfman look from 1972.
There was a chick magnet back then, right? I had my Jew fro, is what I like to call it, and it was 1972. That's what I looked like, and I'm not sure I could grow my hair like that anymore. But I'd like to try at some point. I don't think they would let me on Channel 7 to do the news every night at 6 and 11.
It's like a Jerry Rubin.
Abby Hoffman kind of thing.
But,
yes. But it was.
Tell us about that moment, and also what made you finally decide to go back after so many years.
I decided to go back when my oldest child. I have 3 children now, 25, 22, and 8. When my oldest child, a daughter, was a freshman in college, she said out of nowhere, "Dad, why don't you go back?" I had 104.5 units when I was kicked out, so I was very close. And she said, "Why don't you go back? What would it be like?" And I thought about it, and I'd often thought, and my wife had often told me, maybe go back when you're retired or something. But when Mia, my daughter, said that, I thought, wow, I've never really thought about the real logistics about how to do this. So I explored it a little bit, and did some due diligence about other colleges and what it would take. And some of the colleges I looked at wanted me to come back and take 60 units. But the new school said they would give me credit for 84 of my 104 units.
That's pretty good.
It was pretty good, yeah. So I could do that, taking 3 classes a year and take 4 years to do it. And there was some kismet involved because I would graduate between the time my oldest child graduated and my second oldest child graduates college, which was this year. So we had a 15 graduation, and a 16 graduation, and a 17 graduation, 2017. And I just thought, that would be pretty cool. And it would tell my children, you're never too old to learn. You're never too old to go back and try something new that you could fail at. You're never too old to change the narrative of your life. The narrative of my life had been what I told you earlier. I was proud to wear this as sort of a badge of honor. Many young men had died in Vietnam. Many Vietnamese had died. And all I did was give up my degree and get kicked out of school. And that was my narrative my whole life until I graduated. And then my narrative changed. I did do that, but now I graduated school, and I'm now very much committed to, what I found out, by the way, was, Mark, was that I wanted to do it for my kids to tell them that you could learn something new, but really, I ended up doing it for myself. I learned that you can, in fact, always learn. You can, in fact, always do something different. You can, in fact, go into something that is not your comfort zone necessarily and get something profound out of it. And I'm trying now to start small effort and campaign to get people, adults, to go back to college. There's this dirty little secret about education. The graduation rate of 4-year colleges and universities in this country is only 52% on average. Now, Montclair has a higher one than that, but on average of all the 4,000 universities and colleges. So that's 48% after all that money, after 6 years, don't graduate. It's scandalous, really, when you think about it, all the money that goes to education by parents, by students, by borrowing money, and 48% don't graduate. That's just terrible. And when I discovered that, I thought, this is what I can get out of my education, you know, because the truth is I'm still living at home after graduating college. And I didn't get a raise for it, and I still have my job. But seriously, you know, a lot of people would go back to college and they will see an immediate increase in their salaries. Over the course of a lifetime, $1 million college graduate makes more than someone who doesn't graduate college, doesn't go to college. So why not start to get people to think about going back to college? And I'm doing that with a new school on a small level right now, trying to get people to go back to school, and we're helping them do that.
That would be great.
Yeah.
No, it's a great idea. Switching gears for a minute, who are your mentors? Who are the people that have had the most influence on you, professionally and personally, and what have they done for you, or what have you taken from them?
Well, that's a great question. You know, I had some newspaper editors, I worked at the LA Times, who were really great, really smart, great reporters and great editors. And when you have people, I believe that everyone needs an editor, literally and figuratively in their lives. And when you embody that, when you can really embrace that and incorporate that, you can learn a lot from people who know a lot. If you can take criticism and say, how can I make myself better? So I had some editors who were really great. In television, you know, the person I looked up to the most, and I worked with for a long time at Good Morning America, was Charlie Gibson. And you know, he gave me folksy advice, and he gave me real concrete advice. And watching him work, and listening to advice he gave me about what it means to be an anchor, what it means to be a reporter, because I think the great anchors were great reporters, and they still have to be reporters when they anchor. You know, Charlie, I think, gave me the most profound advice, and the ease at which he communicated, the authority he brought, not as a, you know, here now the news, but as someone who really touched people and knew people could see him and say, this is a regular guy, I can trust this guy. I got the most out of Charlie Gibson, I think. I'm not sure I ever told him that. So Charlie, if you're watching,
All right, we'll give him the YouTube link.
That's what I'll do. That's what I'll do. He was tremendous. He was a great anchor.
Now, you are involved in a lot of public service, the Alzheimer's Walk and so on. What's the genesis of that? How did you get involved in those types of things?
You know, the genesis for my involvement with Alzheimer's, I'm now working with the former Alzheimer's Association of New York, now called Caring Kind. They asked me to, out of nowhere, just sort of MC their walk in 1998. And it just so happened that it was just a couple of months after my father had died of dementia. So I thought, well, this is just perfect timing for me. And then the things I have tended to get involved with since then. I'm involved in a lot of nonprofit opportunities, organizations, from the opportunities we get at the station when they ask for people to speak and everything else. But I have, for many years, I've been involved in organizations that I think were close to my family. My mother died at the age of 61 of lung cancer. So I have, for the last 16 years or so, worked with a lung cancer research organization that raises money for research into lung cancer. My parents, when I was a child, had a child who was severely disabled and died after only 2 weeks. But my parents got very involved in what is, and this is not a politically correct organizational name now, but it was quite politically correct in the late 50s. They got involved with the Association for the Advancement of Retarded Children. Now, you don't say that word now, it's the R word, but that's what that was what they called themselves back then in the 50s. And they still exist. They don't call themselves that, they use the acronym, just much like the NAACP. And so when I'm involved with this, when I do these events, I feel my parents sort of, on my shoulder saying, good for you for doing that. My parents are both dead. And, so lung cancer and Alzheimer's and services and level playing fields for people with disabilities,
Right.
Those events especially are deeply seated inside me. And they have, I do them out of a profound respect for my parents and the causes that they believed in.
That's terrific. That's really good. I want to ask you really two quick things. One is, what is local TV news going to look like 5 to 10 years from now? We see the revenue decreasing. We see viewership decreasing because of our devices and so on. What's your expectation for local?
Well, first of all, if I could say
news?
what it's going to look like in 5 or 10 years, then I would be
Then you'd make all the
really.
money.
I would also invest in the stock market differently. You know, I believe that local news. We're talking local news. I don't know if network news is going to fall in the same category, but I'm hoping it does. But I do believe that local news, despite all this stuff, will remain still the biggest platform that there is. Anybody can post. Anybody can turn this on and post something on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or the other million platforms they have. Not everyone can be on television. Not everyone can do what you're just doing now, and that's interviewing and asking questions.
Right.
Not everyone can do that well. I think it's easy to do bad television. It's very hard to do good television. We try to do good television. There's no question that my kids don't sit and watch the local news like they did when we were growing up, like I did when I was growing up. And there's no question that that generation doesn't do that as much. But when news breaks, people turn to us, turn to the other stations, but I think they turn mostly to us, but turn to television, local news, to find out what's happening right now. And I believe that that social media, the involvement in social media, I'm very involved in social media.
Right.
And I believe that it helps bring people to our station. I think it helps familiarize people in a different way than they would just seeing us on television, by communicating, by getting involved in discussions, by saying you can't be nasty with each other.
So it's still an important public service.
I think local news
Yeah.
will not, I believe, I'm an optimist, I believe it will not die. I think the viewers are not as big as they were before, but it is still, by far, the biggest media that there is. No one competes with it, and more people will turn into local news. We have at Channel 7 especially, so many of our viewers not getting information and news from the social media, although many do, but a huge chunk of people in the New York metro area, 22 million people, 21 million people, get their news sometimes only from television news. And that's a big responsibility. And I don't see that, well, that is shrinking because the pie is being divided so much. We're still going to be bigger than anybody else. So
Well, you're the number one station, and I think you're going to be there for a while.
knock on wood. I hope so, if they'll have me.
Bill, thank you for being here.
Oh,
and
my pleasure. It's great talking.
Congratulations. It's great to see you. And thank you for joining us as well. For more information on this or any edition of Carpe Diem, contact us at carpediem@mail.montclair.edu or call 973-655-5158. I'm Marc Rosenweig. For all of us at Montclair State University, thanks for watching Carpe Diem.